Oh, hey, just like that, we are live. Hello and welcome to Live at Epiphan. It's Thursday at 3 o'clock Eastern, and Dan and I are here to share some news and some interesting tidbits. And I think actually this will be an interesting show, some food for thought. And there was a lot of food conversation in our pre show, but maybe
I
that's for
just
another
finished
time.
my burrito like 10 seconds before we went live. So
It's perfect timing.
I might go into a food coma halfway through the show, but I think we'll be okay. If you clicked on this video, you're probably interested in the headline topic, which is Web 3.0. Some of you may be already familiar with the buzz around Web 3.0, but what is it really? That's what we're going to be talking about later on. But George, first, how are you?
I'm doing pretty well. All things considered, it's freezing cold, and don't want to go outside, and there's not much to do outside these days right now. Anyway, so it's just make do and move on.
Maybe you should go get a burrito. That would be
I
something.
actually should. I should, but the closest burrito place to me does not rank on that list you guys were discussing earlier. So we'll have to try that another time.
We'll find you something. Let's say hi to everybody in chat. I see Sanoga. Eagle VP, hello from the UK. Nice to see you. Do you guys eat burritos over there? I don't know. Is that a thing?
I
Fish
can't
and
think
chips,
of
probably, right?
Yeah, fish and chips for sure, but I can't think
Some
of a
bangers and
burrito
mash.
place in the UK. I had that the other day. Also had some haggis on my birthday on the weekend, which was great. Always the
Very
good
nice.
things.
I think we need to start a spin-off show that's like your foodie show, George.
Just food.
because
Yeah, just food.
That would be awesome.
There's quite a few of us in that here at Epiphan that love good food. So, um, yeah. But first, Dan, how
Yes.
about the lowdown and
The
what
lowdown.
we're
We got a bunch of news. Let's get right
yeah.
into it. The lowdown. Dun,
This is
dun,
before we
dun.
want to dive into our big topic. There were a bunch of really interesting things that we wanted to touch on, and I'll be honest, some of these are somewhat related or maybe adjacent to the main topic today. But the first one is, and we've touched on a bunch of these throughout the past year or so, yet another acquisition.
Yes, this is a big acquisition, but this time not in the video space, but in the video game space. Microsoft to acquire Activision Blizzard in a deal valued at 68.7 billion with a B dollars. This is a big deal. I don't know if we can
Yeah.
share here, but we've got some images here of the major IPs that Microsoft now owns, courtesy of Activision Blizzard, and this is going to make waves in the video game industry, that's for sure.
Yeah. And what's interesting about this is obviously I think everyone's probably pretty well aware that video gaming as an industry and as a space and live streaming, they're very parallel adjacent these days, right? So, I mean, some of the biggest content creators on the planet are game streamers. One of the biggest platform, well, all three of the biggest platforms with Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook center around gaming for their live content, right? I mean, this is a big deal. And it's a huge amount of money. Will it actually go through? I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah,
I mean,
that was a question that I had. Like, is there any kind of antitrust happening here? I mean, some of these gaming companies are starting to become pretty large, and with
yeah,
something like Microsoft, where they own both the distribution of content and the creation of content, and the studios who develop the games. Like, is
yeah.
this teetering towards some kind of monopoly? Like, I don't know.
Right. Is it okay for a company that also makes 50% of the console market to own one of the companies that has some of the largest IP that's used on those? Like, I don't know. That's seems like a competition issue. And of course, that's not new ground for a company like Microsoft, who seems to always find themselves in hot water. I feel like we're starting to see more acquisition potential that gets blocked by some of this stuff, right? So I mentioned in our pre-show, right, we're starting to see news about NVIDIA potentially just giving up on their acquisition of ARM because they're just
I
getting
heard that,
roadblocked
yeah.
by the European courts. So, it's entirely possible that this just gets blocked. But also, if you think about it, NVIDIA was only going to pay like $4 billion or something like that for ARM, compared to this amount of money. Like, this is just crazy. This is crazy.
Yeah, which is interesting because you're going to need some processing power to run all of these games.
Yeah.
Um, But
Crazy
speaking
world.
of handheld processing power, one of the most popular apps out there for video right now, TikTok, had some news. George, what can you tell us about this?
I can tell you that I am not a fan of TikTok. That's the starting point. And, part of it, I think, is a little bit of what we're going to talk about, which it's just there's some shady stuff with TikTok. I mean, all of the weird fringe rumors of, Chinese government stuff aside, that's not really what I'm talking about. There's other things that are questionable at this company. So one of the first ones is they want to crack open the market, take some stuff from Twitch to or YouTube or whatever, and the best way to do that is they need to break into more of the desktop market and out of just the mobile market. And to do that, they need software for live streaming, and they want to break into the live streaming market. So they've built an app called TikTok Live Studio. I haven't tried it myself, but by all accounts, it seems like it's pretty straightforward and easy to use. And it should be, because the accusation is that allegedly they essentially just stole the whole thing from OBS, which you can't do necessarily.
Yeah, this isn't the first time we've heard of
Nope.
OBS's open source code being stolen and repackaged and resold, is it?
Exactly. Streamlabs also got in trouble for this not long ago. And so it was kind of funny because this came very hot on the heels of that controversy, which apparently OBS as a group and Streamlabs did work out an arrangement for that. Yet to be seen if TikTok can do that. Considering the next piece of this puzzle is how TikTok does revenue in terms of content creators getting paid is, makes it all smell a little funny.
Yeah, actually, I heard something about that. So TikTok had a creator fund.
Yeah.
And much like YouTube Shorts, when you want to launch a new platform or even a new feature within a platform, you need to have people creating some content with it, right? So they create these creator funds that kind of jumpstart production and finance some of the creators to get rolling with their content. But some controversy there. Do these creator funds actually, does the money make it to the creators? How does this play out?
I think it does. The question is how much. So Hank Green, widely known semi-internet celebrity, who commentaries on a lot of these things, did some math and did a great breakdown. And we could put the link to that video in chat if people are interested. But essentially, unlike YouTube, where you're getting an ad revenue share because ads are actually in your content, you can't do that with TikTok. It's not in your content, right? So TikTok's current structure is ads are on the platform, much like banners on a Google search page, right? So no one entity necessarily owns that particular ad impression. And this is kind of going off into the weird marketing weeds here a bit for people, but ad impressions are important, but the context of how they're displayed depends on, how much you're going to get paid for that impression. So all the other video platforms, Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, the ad impression is typically in your video. So they know that any revenue made from that ad impression goes to that creator. TikTok doesn't do it that way. It's just there when you're doom scrolling through TikTok, just occasionally there's an ad in the middle of a couple of different videos. So it doesn't belong to a creator. So their solution was, let's create a giant fund as a creator fund to pay people out of. The problem is since they basically just carve that up amongst all the creators, which means the fund is of a static size and the number of creators grows, and which means the slice of the pie gets smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller.
Can they not distribute it based on views or watch time or popularity?
And I think that's the question.
The most value to the platform?
Yeah, and right now they don't. And that's, I think, ultimately the question, especially if they're going to break out into these other things, much more live streaming, game created content. Like there's some serious things. If they're going to try to go up against Twitch, right? Number one reason why Twitch is so popular with creators is the direct revenue model of subscriptions, donations, bits, ad runs. Like if they can't replicate something similar, they're not going to attract the creators who are looking to get paid for their content. So it's kind of a weird thing. We'll have to see. But I would check out the video that Hank put together. He's kind of an interesting, thoughtful guy when it comes to the Internet of Things. So it's yeah. So if you thought you're going to suddenly turn around and be the the PewDiePie of TikTok,
Yeah, not gonna happen.
wouldn't bet on it yet.
No TikTok millionaires yet. Quick question, George. Do you use TikTok yourself?
I absolutely do not.
Neither do I, because I, the way that I'm seeing it, it's one of those apps that's designed for the high impression dopamine hits.
It is
Does
absolutely
not seem like a healthy mentally
it's
healthy app for people, but I am having folks in like my WhatsApp groups sharing videos from TikTok more and more frequently. So I'm like, okay, most of my friends are using this, and I guess I still see some of what the creators are doing just because those videos get shared with me on other platforms.
Yeah, same here. But I'll be honest, most of the time it just annoys me. I had someone share one video with me today that seemed interesting on the surface, and right away I'm like, why do they always use such obnoxious music for these? Like, I don't understand. I don't. Maybe it's all this gray hair. I just don't get it.
Yeah, well, there's something to it. Yeah, you're the boomer now, George.
Apparently.
On a similar note, yeah, YouTube also recently had shut down their sort of originals creator content program.
Yeah,
so
speaking of PewDiePie.
I don't know. This might not be good news, or maybe it is. I don't know.
I don't think anyone. I really don't think anyone cares, to be honest. They launched this. They tried to sign up a bunch of creators like PewDiePie, who I mentioned earlier, to get all these big content creators, but no one consumes it. I'm not aware of a single person that has ever cared about YouTube originals. It's just not the way people treat a platform, right? It's different when we're talking about Netflix originals, where even you don't even get a Netflix unless you pay X amount of money, right? That's one thing. But YouTube is always perceived as a zero entry. You don't have to pay to enter. So why would I care about original content when I really just care about consuming stuff for free, right? So it's kind of this weird.
But hasn't there been some good content that's come out of it? Like, didn't Cobra Kai, the series, start?
Right, but did anyone care?
Original?
But did anyone care until it was on Netflix?
Yeah,
that's the thing.
Maybe it was a launching pad to some other things, though. I guess
it could be, but I hasn't done that for me. It was something that I remember when they launched it, and then promptly forgot all about it and didn't think about it again until the news of them shutting it down came out. Yeah. So,
well, maybe Google just didn't have the right people at the helm who knew how to do what Netflix did. I mean, Netflix has been incredibly successful with their model of original content.
And let's be honest, when we're talking about the big social media companies, is that really shocking that they tried something and failed, or that a project under the Google umbrella didn't go the way they thought, so they just shut it down? I mean, that's just par for the course, right? So that's not shocking to me. Really at all. But, big tech tries to do a lot of things. They try everything, and they got their fingers everywhere. And maybe
this is true.
That's what brings us to the main topic today. And we're going to play a little game, Dan. We're going to play a little game that we like to call Love It or Loathe It. And that's going to be about our main topic, which is Web 3.0.
Okay.
So, Dan, do you want to run us a little history here on the web versions?
Okay, so Web 1.0, the early days of the internet, back in the late 90s, early 90s.
80s up to the 90s. Raise your hand if you ever used Web 1.0.
I mean, Web 1.0 was kind of like a reader-only experience, protocols like FTP, where you're going onto a server somewhere and you're accessing data that is stored on that server. Maybe you're reading an article. Okay, that's sort of the dawn of the internet, is the Web 1.0 experience. Yeah. Web 2.0 started to take hold in the late, maybe 1999. I think the term was coined around 1999, but really started to take off in the early 2000s.
Yeah.
And Web 2.0, what differentiated it from the notion of Web 1.0 is that it was the user was both reading and creating content
I've heard it described as read only in 1.0 versus read write in 2.0, from a very generic computer sense.
Yeah. So really, we've been in Web 2.0 for almost 20 years. Like you could make the argument that Web 2.0 is kind of where we've lived, and there's been some evolution within that.
Yeah, there's iteration.
Things like social media, obviously, really taking off more so in the later part of 2008, 2009. And that really changed things a lot because the ability and the ease with which people could create content online and share that content, and the mobile devices, the cloud, all of these things have added layers to
all the video content.
2.0.
Yeah, for sure. So that really brings us to Web 3, which has been talked about for a few years now, and I think people are still trying to get a grasp of what does this really mean. But I think it's particularly interesting to look at this right now in the wake of obviously all this talk about the metaverse and all the things that are happening there, because that is part of this in the sense that Web3, I think it's hard to define, but things like technologies that are emerging that I think everyone's hearing almost on a daily basis now. Things like AI and metaverse and blockchain. All these things are kind of described as integral components to what the vision of Web3 is, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think how I'm seeing Web3 being described, it's kind of three key components. One, it's more open. Okay, so it's more accessible to everyone. The database is not centralized. The data is not owned by 4 big companies. It's owned by everyone. So the data is pushed more to the edge, right? And in order to do that, there's going to need to be higher quality edge devices in computing at the edge of the network as well, which could be a barrier, in fact. So open is number one. Number two is the concept of trustless. And what does that mean? It means that you no longer need a third party to manage your data, right? So George, if I want to share some data with you or some content, or we want to collaborate on some kind of project in the web, we're no longer relying on, some third-party service who we now have to trust with our data. So for example, messaging apps, if we wanted to go to the base level, like ultimately right now, if I want to send you a private message, George, I might be using Facebook or WhatsApp, which is also owned by Facebook, or Instagram, which is also owned by Facebook.
Or maybe Discord, almost owned by Microsoft.
Right. So the data lives on their systems, on their servers somewhere, right? So we don't own our own data. So we have to be able to trust those services, and arguably right now there's maybe a little bit of a lack of trust with big technology companies. The third key concept of Web 3.0 is permissionless. So you can sort of participate without authorization from some governing body. The concept of blockchain perhaps best illustrates that. Is, we can exchange virtual digital currencies without needing a third party to approve that transaction.
Right.
So, more decentralized in the case that, you and I can transact online without needing someone to sort of regulate that in a sense.
It almost sounds like your name is Richard Hendricks and you're describing a new internet. For those that know, no. And if you haven't watched Silicon Valley, you should. Because the 4th season of Silicon Valley is actually honestly inspired by exactly this kind of talk, right? Mm-hmm. The idea of the new internet that Pied Piper rolls out is kind of exactly this, in the sense that the edge compute that you mentioned, right? Like, let's leverage, everyone walks around with these, anybody who used Web 1.0, like I saw some people chiming in chat, anybody who used computers in the Web 1.0 age, arguably the smartphone you have in your pocket today is a supercomputer by comparison. Let's leverage more of that. Let's put it out to the edge. Let's share it widely. Let's not have governing bodies that are gatekeeping, because that is a big thing, like you said, big tech. It's interesting. Right. It has a lot of really interesting theory and a lot of interesting potential, but it's not without its pitfalls, maybe. Like, so first off, I'm not a huge fan of Jack Dorsey, but he's a guy on the internet, and he happens to play a major role in the internet, whether we like it or not. For those who don't know, founder of Twitter. He's quoted as saying and dismissing Web3 as essentially just a plaything of venture capitalists. He sees this as marketing fluff, and admittedly, they're using all the right buzzwords: blockchain, decentralized, AI, like all the buzzwords. All the buzzwords. Yeah, it's all the buzzwords. And let's be honest, big companies, if you're hearing about the technology today for the first time, that means these big companies are probably been working on it for 5 to 10 years. So they're so far ahead of you as the average person that you just don't even try. Bitcoin was a lot like that, right? If you weren't in there at the ground level before it got crazy and billionaires jumped in, just don't even bother. So it's even NFTs have gone that way, by the way. And we'll maybe touch on NFTs again in a second. So, if a guy like Jack Dorsey is saying venture capitalists plaything, what he really means is they're so far ahead of you, everything they're trying to market this as, it probably won't turn out the way you think it does on paper. Yeah. They've already got their hooks into everything.
Well, and this is the question, right? And maybe this is, do we love this or do we loathe this? But the promise of Web 3.0 is, in some sense, democratization of the internet. You own your own data, not some corporate entity far away who is monetizing you as a user.
And to that degree, to some degree, I'd say that's a throwback to almost Web 1.0, where the internet was the wild, wild west. You could literally do whatever you wanted. People just hosted web servers in their home, and you didn't have to deal with these huge entities. Web 2.0 was really the corporatization of the internet in a large respect. And so this, on paper, promises, again, democratization of the internet. But does it really get there, right? Because there's, again, maybe they still control all of these entities, right? If we're talking about basing it on some sort of blockchain tech, well, someone ultimately is going to end up controlling some element of that blockchain. And
sure, yeah.
What does that look like?
As soon as one entity owns 51% of a blockchain, they essentially own the blockchain, right?
Exactly. So, and you're trying to battle
much like democracy, if you get enough people who agree, it's hard for the minority to shift, things the other direction, right?
Exactly. The other potential pitfall to this, and this is where things get a bit touchy, is, of course, we've already seen a lot of talk about free speech or censorship or whatever you want to call it in the current Web 2.0 realm. And there's been a lot of crazy things that have happened the past few years. And
the past couple days, really.
That too. And I don't want to go down that road too deep.
Yeah.
But again, if you're someone who has felt as though you and your opinions have had limited access to participate in social media as it exists today, this all might sound really great on paper. But the flip side to that is sometimes there has to be accountability for some of these things that are just largely inappropriate for the good of humanity. And so if you're saying that it's zero barrier and anybody can jump in, it's like, okay, but what happens to all the things that shouldn't exist that could? And
perhaps it does raise a lot of interesting questions about, do we want to live in a world where it is, like you say, the internet becomes the Wild West? Probably not, right?
Right.
There's a reason why we needed a sheriff, even in the Wild West, right?
Exactly.
But conversely, do we want to live in a world where 4 monopolies control all the data and what you can say and how you can interact? Probably not either. There's sort of 2 extremes that are being balanced. And how does Web 3.0 land in that spectrum? We don't know. I don't think we can say we know how that might play out.
No, and that's one of the things that I struggle with, right? Is like, I don't know where that takes it. And actually, Linda points out something great in chat, which is actually an excellent segue in terms of touching on this as well, because a big part of, obviously, 3.0 would also be the metaverse, right? And Linda's pointing out here, supercomputer in my pocket, but I'm still banging up the RAM limits and storage issues. Excellent point. So what happens when the demands of Web 3.0 becomes so extreme that you need to participate in blockchain or NFTs or the metaverse, what sort of expenses are we talking about on hardware, right? If you have to participate in this as an edge device, what does that mean? I mean, you can't even buy a GPU to play a game for your computer today. Like, what are you going to do if
Yeah.
all of a sudden the system
It does raise
requirements of Web 3.0 is a
Yeah.
3090 Ti? Like, what?
Yeah, it does raise some interesting questions because when you push the computing out to the edge, yes, you're putting the power in the hands of the user more,
Yeah,
but perhaps the barrier to entry is higher
increases.
and some users get left behind, right? So,
Right.
or maybe the users who have, can afford the expensive computing capabilities have more access to higher powered applications or capabilities where,
Yeah.
the users who can't afford those computing devices, they're relegated to the old sort of centralized cloud controlled by the evil dictator. That's not a good thing either, right? So it
It's
raises
a
a
tricky
lot
one.
of more questions, right?
Yeah, and again, I think there's some amazing potential there, right? I mentioned NFTs a couple of times already, right? And again, I personally think the current wave of NFTs is complete silliness. It's just stupid. But again, as an underlying technology, much like cryptocurrency's underlying technology of blockchain has a lot of potential, right? What if in Web 3.0, it's inherently backed by this blockchain that can use NFTs so that creators actually finally get the content copyright protections that they've been
Yep.
fighting for?
Yeah, I mean, as much as we make fun of NFTs, we were just discussing how people creating content on TikTok aren't adequately compensated for their
No.
efforts. The creator fund at YouTube is essentially non-existent anymore. If creators are able to sort of control the copyright of their own content and monetize it more broadly across many platforms, maybe you create a more robust creator economy within
Exactly.
the internet. And I think we could talk about, ideas for how this might apply for video. Like, George, we are sort of, as Epiphan, living in this space of, moving into cloud production. I mean, this show is powered by cloud production and edge devices. So, in your view, what does Web 3.0, what could it mean for video?
I mean, again, it could be amazing, right? And it has a lot of potential. I've yet to see any of it be real. Some time ago, we touched on, that one blockchain-based video distribution platform that exists out there. It's garbage. It's horrible. Like, it's unusable, and the content on it is garbage and unusable. Like, it's just so. And part of that is maybe chicken and egg. There's just not enough people touching it and using it yet. At the same time, it's like, you look around at just the mess of other platforms that are dealing with DMCA takedowns constantly, people trying to just cheap out on content by reusing other people's content and stuff like that. I think something's got to change to better protect the infrastructure and the intellectual property. And maybe this is how we get there. And funny enough, we've talked in this show in the past as well when we've tried to help people, especially those in, say, churches who are trying to live stream and they run into copyright issues around music, right? It's like maybe NFTs and blockchains and that type of technology is how we integrate even fair use or licensing ability for live content, which is right now a disaster.
Yeah, you raise a good point. And we've talked about it on this show before, but is the challenge of licensing music for live streams is nearly impossible. I mean, we talked to an expert from Warner Chappell way back, a friend of the show, and he was telling us how challenging it is, to prevent live streams from being taken down, even when the production has paid for a license for that music.
Exactly.
Because they've had to automate at scale to prevent copyright infringement, which makes sense. But at the same time, people need to be able to have a way to prove that they own a license to the content they're sharing, and maybe things like NFT and Web 3.0 could help with that. Exactly. Another thing that I think could be exciting for video actually is discoverability.
And that comes from AI in a lot of this, which is a key component.
Yeah, absolutely. Like artificial intelligence could make AI assisted search and context based search more viable. So for example, my phone knows that I'm trying to, renovate my basement or, build a deck in my backyard, because it knows that I've been searching for wood and nails and screws and deck plans. And then when I ask it a question about like how to, pour a concrete base, it knows that I'm searching for a deck base, right? And it points me to the video that's going to help me answer that question in the shortest amount of time possible.
And I think it's important to note, Dan, because that's a great example. Technically, the current algorithms do that pretty much today. The difference is that it's either Apple, Amazon, or Google that owns all that data and all of that
owns
algorithm.
The context, right? So rather than pointing me to the video that's going to help me solve the problem in the shortest amount of time, they're going to, of course, push me to whoever's paying them the most money.
Exactly.
Right? To, Home Depot or Rona or something. What I really need is a video from a small creator showing how to DIY this problem.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So if I can control my own data on my own device with my own artificial intelligence capabilities on my device rather than in some distant corporate cloud, there's a lot of, I would say, opportunity both for me as a user to get better results, but also for creators to be able to provide content to little niches and be quite successful doing that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it could shape the content in a really positive way.
And we do see that a little bit. I use a Chromecast with Google TV as my primary portal for content consumption on Netflix, Prime, and Disney, and all those other platforms. And the Google TV interface looks through all of the algorithms from those apps and then puts up a new one so that you get all those recommendations that we quite honestly, people can complain about them, but they love the recommendations list that Netflix comes up with, right? So with Google, the way they're doing it, they're leveraging their AI algorithms to basically do that cross-platform already. So seeing that increase, again, it's like unifying all these different pieces would probably help. And it's funny, actually, I was just reading chat here, and Cameron joined us in chat. You give this guy a break, and look how chatty he is. Jeez. But he made a great point that I mentioned in our planning meeting for this show, and he wasn't even in that meeting, and that is, let the megacorps take over. Wall-E, here we come. That was exactly my point. That's what I envisioned when I thought about the idea of metaverse, VR, AI, all these buzzwords. First thing that popped into my head was the ship captain from Wall-E sitting back in his chair, never having to walk around or do anything. That's literally what popped into my head. So glad to see Cameron's reading my mind.
Yeah, great film. Wall-E's one of my favorites for anyone who hasn't seen it. One of the best Pixar films, I think, ever made.
Exactly. So. He also makes another great point. Jokes aside, cloud computing's dirty secret is the environmental impact of CO2 emissions. And that's true. And that's potentially a bonus of edge compute as opposed to these massive, in some cases, literally city-sized data centers. Can we get away from the impact of that? I would argue no, you're just distributing it more widely. And then Cameron also pointed out here, humans will always be in the forefront of change while resisting change. Well, yeah, that's just human nature.
Getting philosophical on us today, Cameron. I
exactly,
love it.
exactly. You take him out of the producer's seat, and he just gets all chatty in the comments.
Yeah.
But no, that's great, and those are all valid points, right? Like it's.
So I don't know if we've answered the question: do we love it or loathe it with Web 3.0? But I guess we're gonna wait and see. And I don't think this is gonna happen overnight. This is gradual change, but
for sure,
in the same way that Web 2.0, accelerated quickly after a few key breakthroughs, that could very well happen with Web 3.0 as well. So we'll be watching this for sure.
So maybe the follow-up question is Zuckerberg's metaverse the trigger, or is it something after that?
I guess we'll find out.
I would say the bleeding edge, the first is never the winner. So I would say it's whatever comes next. Unless you consider Second Life was the first wave, and this is the second wave.
Who uses Second Life? I don't know if that.
Have you not
You're
heard
making
that?
a reference that most people probably don't
Well,
know.
yeah,
I remember Second Life.
I'm a web 1.0 guy. What can you tell? But I've seen that thrown around a lot. That Metaverse is just Second Life 2.0. So
There you go.
That's always fun.
Hey George, we've ranted on Web 3.0
We have.
enough. Why don't we take a little break and pop over to the kitchen?
Oh, sure. Gives me a chance to take a drink.
Yes, absolutely. Let's do it. So, welcome to the kitchen. This is where we talk a little bit about what's been happening around Epiphan lately.
Mm-hmm.
And we've got some cool stuff coming up. What's first on the list here, George?
First on the list is next week we have a webinar coming up all about the Perl family. We've done this webinar in the past, and it's always been very popular. It's always great to share with people if they're looking to attend live, learn more about Epiphan products, in particular the Perl. In this instance, this is our first webinar of the new year, so we're pretty stoked on that and ready to get back into it after a bit of a break around the holidays and leading into January. So that's great. So if you know someone who's looking for stuff,
yeah, absolutely. This is where you can learn all about the Epiphan Perl line of products, which are how we power this show. So if you think this show looks pretty good, well, maybe you should take a look at what Perl can offer
exactly
to produce your own content. One interesting thing with this is it is happening on 02/02/22 at 2 p.m. Eastern. So
yes,
the stars have aligned for this webinar. I think it will be
about the twos.
I think it will be very fun.
And we will talk about Perl 2. So there you go.
Yeah, there you go. It's not a Tuesday though.
It's a Wednesday. 2 weeks after that, we will have our next webinar. And this is one I'm actually super excited about because I know there's going to be a bunch of cool stuff talked about. And that webinar on February 16th is going to be all about Epiphan Cloud. And again, that's a key component of how we do this show and how many Epiphan customers are doing their productions these days. And we got some cool stuff we want to talk about. So we'll share what's going on now. And we'll pull back the curtain a little.
Yeah, you want to talk about buzzwords, remote video production.
Oh, man.
Going to be a big buzzword this year, I know. So
I was just watching a video earlier about like this guy describing that, the next generation newsroom and how they currently work, how they used to work, and how they will work. It's all crazy remote hybrid stuff in the cloud, man. All of it.
Yeah. And, the cloud is great, but if you don't have powerful edge devices, when it comes to video equipment, you still need a camera and a microphone in the room. So, Epiphan Perl line of products paired with the cloud, very, very powerful pairing. Another thing we have here, great blog article from our senior writer, Michael Manette, hardware versus software encoding, which is best for your project.
And we've covered this on the show quite a bit in the past, but this is a great blog breakdown of it. Some people prefer to read and really kind of take the time to pick it apart. And so that's a great blog talking about that. And then the last thing I'll point out is subscribers to our YouTube channel, make sure you like and subscribe and follow and all the things, may have noticed a whole bunch of newer, shorter videos coming out on our channel. And one was very, recently, I think it was just last night, maybe, Dan, came out.
Yeah, we've had a whole bunch of new videos, topics like balanced versus unbalanced audio. What's the difference? Smallest camera in the world. Actually, that was our last live episode.
Yeah.
This one's been pretty popular. H.264 versus H.265. And this is one of our new video content creators and host, Lorray, who really breaks down the topic of what is the difference between H.264 versus H.265 and why should you care what to watch for. So lots of great sort of how-to and learning content on the YouTube channel, but also some of those topics that maybe you've heard of and you want to actually understand more fully. The YouTube channel is a great place to find all of that. So if you're here with us now, subscribe, hit that notification bell, or just go ahead and browse through some of our recent uploads and you'll find some cool topics.
Absolutely. There's some great pieces in there. It's and nice short ones too, so it's easy to digest, which also means it's easy to share.
We want people to binge.
I would like people to share. I like sharing. Sharing is caring, Dan. Come on.
Exactly.
So if you know someone who's interested in any of those tech topics, make sure that you share those videos with them to help them along. I think that's probably a wrap for today. Our next episode will be February 10th, and we'll have another exciting and interesting one, which I know we're working on, so I can't really give any spoilers there. But man, there's so much stuff in the pipeline. It's crazy.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah. A lot of news, a lot of events, some cool things coming with Epiphan soon. So
exactly. So that's great. Thanks, Dan. It's always great chatting, and I hope people's interest was piqued by Web 3.0, or maybe they're just going to go hide under a rock. Either way, mission accomplished, and we will see you next time. Thanks, everyone.
bye.